Select Board, we call to order and are now going to do the Pledge of Allegiance led by John.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up tonight is open forum, and I believe Chris has something.
I do, yes, thank you. At the last joint planning board, select board meeting, there was some public comment about what's the town doing to promote town meeting. I think also the bylaw that we were discussing that evening is of concern to several residents. So as we were walking out of the meeting, Kristen's texting us saying, I'm on it. I was watching the meeting. I've got plans. So I just wanted to update the people who are watching what some of those plans are. So if we, the select board, signs the warrant this evening, this will be posted at Town Hall, the J.V. Fletcher Library, and on the town website. We're going to be displaying the special town meeting banner beginning Monday, October 9th at Town Common. We will be putting up the highway message board signs on Boston Road that will be displaying that there's a special town meeting coming up. We are also going to be sending out a postcard regarding special town meeting, and we hope to include on that postcard a QR code or at least a friendly URL to the town meeting webpage, which would have more information about what's going on at town meeting. Our town moderator is going to be recording a public service announcement at WCAT, and that will be broadcasted regularly until town meeting. And she's also looking out to do a Q&A with some town staff. And she's also putting out an electronic flyer that will be posted to the police, town clerk, and rec Facebook pages. The town manager's newsletter went out a few days ago, and that had information about special town meeting. And then we are also going to do the town manager monthly WCAT report, which is being taped. It was taped on the 20th and will be aired. And then the town manager will be speaking at the Rotary on October 12th and discussing the warrant and special town meeting. The League of Women Voters does the preview of town meeting on October 12th, and that will be via Zoom. And then the planning board's official report on the firearms zoning bylaw proposal will be voted on in their meeting on October 2nd. The land use department will be preparing a yes/no document and a frequently asked question document regarding the firearms zoning bylaw proposal, and that will be distributed electronically. Are we going to make that at town meeting as well? Will it be a handout that people can?
We can definitely look into
Might
that.
be something we want to think about. And there's also going to be another WCAT video with the land use department and planning board members. So we've got a lot of information going out there, but of course, the best way to get the word out is for residents to encourage other residents to go. So we hope to have a healthy attendance at town meeting. Thank you, Tom.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. And
thank you, Kristen and town staff, for doing all this work.
Of course.
And thank you for all the town organizations like the League and other folks you mentioned that help support this as well. Maybe we can just recap time, place, date for special town meeting. Just
Sure, absolutely. So it's Monday, October 16th, 7 o'clock, Westford Academy Gymnasium. And we have reached out to board and commissions per the moderator's request to make sure that no one is holding any meetings that evening, or the sports leagues are not meeting to the extent that we can prevent that.
That's great. It's coming up. Other items from the board for open forum? Anything from the public?
There's one person online, Beth Perkins, wishes to speak.
Okay, great. Welcome, Beth. Just gonna give Beth a chance to get updated and visible.
Frozen in time.
Hold on, Beth. We can't hear you in the meeting room, so I'm gonna see if... Beth, can you try again?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Beth,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Welcome, Beth.
Hi. I just wanted to let people know about two very informative events that we have coming up here in town this week. We have Mike Berlinski, who's chair of our Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. Tomorrow night, which is Wednesday night, it is going to be doing a webinar on ISO New England. ISO New England is the organization that's responsible for keeping our electricity flowing through New England. They're the ones that we always ask the question of at the beginning of the winter or the hottest day of summer. Will we have enough electricity to keep powering our homes? So, and they're also the organization that we're going to be looking to help us with a lot of our climate goals. So he's going to be doing a webinar on ISO New England tomorrow night, and you could sign up for that. I think we have an advertisement for that on the homepage of the Westford's website. We definitely have one on Westford Climate Action or on our events page. Second important event is Thursday night at the J.D. Fletcher Library. It's called Heat Pump 101, and I think as everyone here knows, heat pumps are one of the ways that we are going to save all kinds of energy with heating and cooling, and a lot of people have questions on how to transfer their heating and cooling to heat pumps. So this is a neighbor-to-neighbor event where you'll hear from people in town who have actually installed heat pumps, and you can get a lot of your questions answered. So again, that event is going to be both live at the J.B. Fletcher Library at 7 on Thursday, and you can also sign up to do a webinar of that, also on the town's website and on Westford Climate Action.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
That's great. Thanks, Beth. So if people want those events, they can Google Westford Climate Action. It'll come up and you'll see the events. Thanks for sharing that, and look forward to both those events. Those both sound valuable. Any other open forum items? Okay. Next up is our 7:05, the consent agenda. First request is the Town Common and Bandstand. The event is the Kessler Karate Academy, which is karate demonstrations and team practice. The applicant is Jess Anderson. The dates are September 29th and October 6th. Time is 5:15 to 6:30. Second request for the Common Bandstand is for the Westford Girl Scouts Town Tree Lighting Ceremony. Kira Ernest is the applicant. The date is November 26th of 2023. The time is 3:30 to 6 p.m. There's a banner request for the Westford Academy Holiday Bazaar. The applicant is the Westford Academy Holiday Bazaar Committee. The dates are November 24th through December 3rd. Location is J.B. Fletcher Library. There's a street road closure request, which is, the event is a neighborhood block party. The applicants are Krista Vassi and Andrea McKinley. Location is 1 through 15 Lillian Road. The date is October 1st with a rain date of October 8th. Time is 1 to 5 p.m. This was approved previously, but we're changing the date. Another street closure request is for the Cubmobile event for Westford PAC 100. The applicant is Kelly Silva. The location is number 5 to the dead end on Fisher Way. The date is October 15th, and the time is 10:30 to 4 p.m. And I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Fantastic. Next up is our 710 item. This is a continuation of the American Rescue Plan funding requests to determine allocations. And there's a bunch of materials in the packet for those that want to dig in more on where we are with ARPA. Kristen, I think this is yours.
Sure, I can get this started, and Dan O'Donnell, our finance director, is in the room as well if there's any questions. We do have on here review projects approved, funding spent, and funding available. We're certainly willing to go through that if you wish, but there are some minor requests that I think are the meat of the meeting this evening. Also just want to remind the public, we are taping this meeting. We did receive an advisory from the Attorney General's office, so I just want to make that announcement to make sure we're in compliance with that. But going back to ARPA, some of you may be aware that that we have funded a mobile health clinician services, both through the COA and other avenues. Those services will be running out for funding in October. The Community Wellness Coordinator and the Council on Aging are seeking grant funding to continue that service. The Community Wellness Coordinator has provided a memo in your packet listing the amount of people that mobile health clinician has seen, the ages, which is various ages, and the types of diagnoses that mental health clinician has been helping people grapple with. And we are asking for an additional $10,000 to get through a few more months related to that service, which has been very helpful to our residents. And this clinician is based in Westford and is able to go out and about to serve that. So that is one of the requests this evening. I'm happy to take questions on that or move to the other ones and talk about it as a whole, whichever the board prefers.
Any questions on the first? Okay, why don't we continue?
Okay, so the next two could be taken separately or lumped together. The select board previously had approved, I believe, $25,000 of ARPA funds to begin a record digitization project. The assessor's office was the first department to go through that. We have a vendor and have gone through about 60 to 70% of the assessor's documents. The assessor is extremely happy with the way that the documents have been scanned and that the ease that he can access the documents. He's also sharing those documents with other departments so people don't have to go through the paper copies. There were more records than we had anticipated in our initial budget and scope, and we feel that to finish that project we'd require an additional $13,650. We do know that other departments were lined up and prepared to go behind the assessor's office using the same firm and the same type of system. So we would think that the HR department would be the next department to go, given their vast number of records related to town employees and retirees, and that we anticipate would be $36,350 to finish out the HR department.
Good, thanks. Any questions? Yep, Andrea?
Can you remind us what's our balance that we have?
Yes, Dan, I'll have you come up.
That we still have left to spend?
So we have $384,919 remaining.
And we haven't funded, which master plan?
So we haven't funded the land
The
use
land use
master
plan.
plan.
Okay.
And we have until
In the strategic plan.
basically the end of this calendar year to allocate,
December 2024.
2024.
Right.
And we have, one of the other major requests was related to the health insurance trust.
Correct.
So those are still out in front of us in terms of decisions. Chris?
So what happens with, I assume this catches us up, you go back in time, get to today. What happens going forward for new documents that are produced? Are they automatically going to be digital and go into whatever archive this is?
So I can't speak for every department, but most departments are accepting documents digitally, and then it goes into that filing system, so it's already set up, or as a document is coming in, it's being scanned and then put in the system.
So we'll keep,
So
once we backfill, we're going to keep
We'll
up.
keep up with it, exactly. This is really the backlog from however far back the documents go.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So, but how about a comment? Okay. I certainly have no issue with the mobile clinician. I think it's a very valuable service, and obviously, looking at the statistics that were provided, it's clearly being used. It's a little disconcerting to me that we have so many 5 to 9-year-olds who are making use of the service, but. And I also think we've started the assessor's department, and so we have to complete it. It makes no sense to stop in the middle of it. The one that gives me pause is the $36,000 for additional departments, particularly because we've only got $384,000 left, and we've still got some big things out there, including health insurance and the trust fund that we might want to spend. So. I'm thinking that maybe, at least for me, we hold on the $36,350 and see where we are, perhaps in a couple of months, since that will give them time to complete the assessor's digitalization, and then we can see where we are there. That's just my thoughts.
Is there any driver, aside from just modernization for the HR department? Is there any requirement that they become digital by any particular time? Or?
So I don't know how many of you have been in the HR department recently, but they're in very tight quarters. Their filing cabinets take up a lot of space there. So that would be one item, that it would free up space for them to actually move around a little bit better in their office area and have a little bit more privacy, and also just be able to find documents a lot easier with this digital record system.
When were you planning to start that in human resources?
So they are pretty much boxed up and ready to go if we were to authorize the funds. They thought that there would be available funds in the previous allocation, which unfortunately is not the case. So they would be able to go as soon as funding is available.
Any other opinions?
I have another question.
Sure.
So the ongoing cost, is this system that we use to index and store all these images, does that have an ongoing cost component to it?
I don't believe so. I believe it's just on a file server that we have. Dan, yes, okay. It's just on a file server, so it's not a special system that we pay a yearly subscription to or anything like that.
Is Rico doing the same? Would they be doing human resources?
They can, yes.
And they're already doing
Assessors,
assessors.
correct.
So they have to add more people, or they're gonna just dovetail into it when you get through with?
They would dovetail into it.
Okay, so you have to finish one before you start the other.
Right. We would want to make sure that assessors is finished out and we have enough funding to take care of them before we bring in a new department and split. You don't want a department to go halfway, similar to what we're having a situation now, and then not be able to finish.
I was just going to look at the timing.
Sure.
See if it could be delayed, so.
That was
That's what
kind
you
of
were talking
what I
about,
was
right?
talking about, is finish assessors and then come back and look at this.
Yeah, and we can always see if there's available funds left of the, we think 13,650 is a conservative estimate to get assessors done. Perhaps it won't be that much, but that's what we want to be safe and make sure that they finish.
So you have an idea of when they might be done?
They were running fairly quickly. Eric, do you have a sense of when they might be done from Will?
I'm sorry, I don't actually have an estimate.
They were fairly quick with when we gave them the button to go. It was like a few months. It wasn't a year or anything like that.
Well, I guess we are in extraordinary budget times, and we are going to be making some really difficult choices in this budget cycle, and to the extent that we may be looking at that $35,000 and saying, boy, there's balancing off all the different needs, where does it belong? Clearly an important thing to do, clearly important for the convenience and sort of office welfare of the people doing the work, but I don't know, do others feel like maybe we should hold on that until we...
I'm fine with
Okay.
holding. Yeah.
I
I
think
don't
we
see
should.
any harm in doing that.
Yeah, I agree with holding it, but I'd like to kind of get an idea when you finish with the other one, because I wouldn't want to
Sure.
lose a whole lot of time.
Okay.
I mean, we'll have a little bit more information. I don't know whether we can wait till the budget task force.
Yeah, we can certainly get a sense of when
That's coming up on the
assessment-
18th, so not
Okay,
too
that's
long
not too
from now.
long,
So we'll have
so-
two,
So we could do that, I think.
during the month of October, we'll have a lot of chances
Okay.
to get deep on budget. So maybe
We could
pause
hold
until
on
then.
that.
Okay, so I think the motion then is to approve the Westford Mobile Clinician Services for $10,000 and record digitalization for the Assessors Department for $13,650.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you much. Our 712 item is a request to approve a Class 1 new car application for DCD Bach Honda, doing business as New Car Honda of Westford, 299 Littleton Road. And we're changing the DBA and the license. I guess, Patty, what's anything important we should be noting on this one?
I only want to point out it's all the same, except that it's a different DBA. They are changing their, part of their business to, you hear from Bach Honda?
Yes, I'm here from Craig, I'm the general manager at the store,
That's what I thought.
and we're changing it to.
I'm sorry, sir.
If you
Would you
wanna-
mind coming up to the mic? I'm sorry, we didn't tell you that, so there's no way you could have
My
known.
name's Kevin Craig, I'm the general manager over at Block Honda West, and we're
Nice.
changing our DBA to New Car Honda of Westford.
Okay.
So right now it's Block Honda West, so.
Thanks for being here tonight. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you
Thank you.
for doing
I appreciate
business in Westford, we appreciate it.
Yep, appreciate it too, thank you.
Okay, 7:15, joint meeting with the J.V. Fletcher Library trustees to appoint Debbie Teal as a member until next town election. So do we need the library trustees to come into,
Yes, we're working on it.
into session? Hi, Ellen.
Hi, how are you doing?
We're doing great, good to see you.
At least a quorum of 3 trustees and potentially a 4th. Mary Ann is joining us.
Hi, Marion.
Liz Ford. Hello. Deb Teal is a candidate who's both stood for election and for appointment in the past.
Great, and Ellen, are you expecting one more?
It's like,
Lynn Claremont is coming, and Glenn Secord, that makes a quorum according to trustee bylaws.
So
Okay.
I see Buffy, I see
Buffy's
Lynn,
here.
and I see Marianne. I don't see Glenn.
Here's Lynn.
I'm here too.
Well, then Lynn can convene you and Buffy can take minutes.
Lynn, you've got some noise in the background, Lynn. Thank you so much. Okay, Ellen, does this put you in session?
Yes, so this is a quorum, and Lynn, our chair, can call their part of the joint meeting to order.
I apologize, I'm with family, so I'll mute after we start. So I'd like to call this joint meeting with the select board and the library trustees to order.
Great, welcome. And I guess, Ellen, would you like to present the candidate?
Let me take a Claremont,
Here.
Dirk's here, Fleckner. Here. Roach, not here. Secor, not here, so 4 of us are here. 3 of us are here,
Three.
sorry.
Debbie Teal has both stood for election in a contested trustee race a couple of years ago, and then in a crowded summer appointment race in 2018. She stood for appointment again, and Glenn, one of our current trustees, actually was appointed by the joint boards at that point. But Debbie has remained an ardent user and supporter, and we really would like to have her join the board. We are down a member who is traveling the globe, and we would like to welcome her to the board.
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to want to entertain any questions from the select board. Any questions? I'm seeing a lot of sort of positive, no questions.
Looks good.
So I think the way this works is we typically would follow your lead. So do the library trustees want to go ahead and vote on the appointment, and then we'll follow and take a vote after?
Ellen, can we take a motion and a second?
Yes.
So I'll make the motion to appoint Debbie Teal to the library trustees.
Second.
So the voting goes like this: Claremont,
Aye.
Dirks, aye, Fleckner,
Aye.
Roach not here, Secor not here, so it passed 3-0-0.
Great, thank you so much. And select board, I'll entertain a motion to appoint Debbie Teal as a member until next town election to the library trustees.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, it was unanimous here. Thank you,
Thank
Debbie, and
you. Thank you,
welcome.
Debbie,
Thank you for your
welcome.
service.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Great, if you have no further business, Ellen, you could adjourn.
I take a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry, was that you, Lynn, making the motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
Okay. And Mary Ann, you seconded it?
Yes.
Voting goes like this: Claremont,
Aye.
Dirks, aye, Fleckner,
Aye.
Roach is not here, Secor is not here, so pass 3-0-0.
Great,
Thank you so much.
7:24 p.m.
Great, thank you.
very efficient. Thank you, library trustees.
Thank you.
Have a great
Good
night.
night.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, 720 item is an update on the Amoresco preliminary energy audit dated September 14th. My understanding is that our very active and engaged Clean Energy Committee has some questions. They're having a meeting next week to follow up with some questions, and this is sort of an interim update for us tonight. Does that sound right?
That is correct. So
Okay.
they received an update last Wednesday. They still had some questions. We wanted to make sure this board got the preliminary information, was able to ask questions before it went back to the CEASC next week, and then perhaps to your October 10th meeting for approval.
Okay, so I know we wanted to have a chance to surface any initial questions. Should we go ahead and do that first, or is there anything that's
We do
prepared?
have a brief presentation. Beth Greenblatt, our consultant, and Amoresco is on the line, so we'd be looking to entertain a quick presentation, and then any questions that you might have, if that's okay.
That sounds great, okay. Take it away, Beth.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone having a great evening. I'm going to defer to Dan, if that's okay with you folks, Dan from Amoresco, to go through the presentation that he put together based on the last conversation that we had had. I'm certainly here for questions and to opine on some of the aspects of the current status of the project.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Dan.
Good evening, everyone, and yes, thank you, Beth, for the introduction. And joining me as well, select board members, is Zach Walsh, who is the lead developer on the project. So, Zach, thank you very much for joining. And as was mentioned by the town administrator, we did have a pretty robust meeting with the sustainability committee last week. We fielded about 30 or so questions, plus or minus, and appreciate the thoughtful consideration that team has put into our mutual success. So I don't know who's running this slide. Eric, if you could go to the next. So we have a high-level overview, right? So the preliminary audit has been completed and submitted, and based upon some of the direction from Beth and the team, we've identified two option types: the good and the better. Both are meaningful projects, and don't want to underemphasize that point. These are projects that are aligned with the goals and objectives of many elements of the town and the respective boards, and happy to take a deep dive, obviously, into both of these options. They do include renewable energy PV options, primarily at the Blanchard School. And kudos to Jeff and the team for coordinating our mutual efforts with the MSBA funding, the different stakeholders that the town and the schools are working with to move that roof replacement forward. And then the better option does include some partial electrification that we'll take a deeper dive into, and then hopefully we can discuss next steps. Next slide, please. So Beth, back in July, presented to the board really the framework for what defines a good option. And I don't want to get into the nitty gritty because we're hard on time, but the good scenario, again, is a meaningful project for the town, aligned with many of the goals and objectives that have been defined by the various boards in the town, especially the sustainability committee. The primary driver for this, above and beyond the climate neutrality and making meaningful investments in your buildings, is to have the project be budget neutral. So, Eric, if you could go to the next slide, please. So the general overview is the energy conservation measures should have a post-incentive payback of less than 20 years. Many of the measures that we're talking about in this good option include many of the carbon reduction elements that are, a primary drive for these overall projects. That includes building management systems, lighting upgrades, and building shell improvements. We're going to provide the town with two options around the solar PV at the Blanchard. One is where the town would own, operate, and maintain the PV installation, and the other being a power purchase agreement where Amoresco would fund the full turnkey system, own, operate, and maintain it, and not have the town have to bear the burden of paying that capital expenditure. The good option has an approximate value of $6.3 million, and the energy savings from the project are supplementing the improvements. So it's a budget. Its intent is to be a budget neutral project. Now, one highlight here is that the museum, the partial electrification at the museum, is not included yet in the good option. We had a pretty robust conversation with the sustainability committee, and we were looking for some feedback from them, whether or not we may want to shift that element into the good project. Next slide, Eric. And please ask any questions, interrupt by all means. This is the matrix, and I'm sure you'll get this presentation if you haven't received it already. This is really a high-level overview. As you can see, the list of inventory of the buildings that are included in the good option, and then the different measures that are included. So those X's represent many of the energy conservation measures that are included in the project. Next slide. So again, Beth presented back in July two options, the better option being one that is still driven by energy conservation and meaningful improvements to the buildings. but it's not budget neutral. It requires an influx of funding. Now, make no mistake, our team is going to work diligently with the town and with the schools to identify as many utility incentives as possible, federal funding, state funding, all those elements will be wrapped into the project. But this better option, which we'll look at on the next slide, please, Ari, has some elements that are capital priorities for the schools, two of which being the rooftop replacements at the Westford Academy, along with the new roof. Those rooftop units, as Jeff, I'm sure, has told you on a number of occasions, that they're well past their useful life. This team's doing a great job at keeping those units going, but it's only a matter of time before we lose those. The roof is also in a state of repair where replacement is pretty imminent. It may not be this month, this year, but we do see it on the horizon. Although, with those two elements, bringing solar PV onto Westford Academy and helping not only the costs around those elements, but the environmental benefit of bringing PV and getting towards the goal of electrifying Westford Academy is something that we see as valuable and has merit and certainly worthy of consideration, but it also has cost implications. It's approximately $10.5 million more than what the good option is. So it would require us to get creative. Capital contributions and whatnot would be required, but we see merit in the project, and not only will it help get us closer to electrification at your largest building within the town, but it also it helps mitigate some of the upcoming costs that we see on the horizon for the town and the schools. Next slide, Eric. So here's the same matrix that includes the partial electrification at both the Blanchard and the museum, along with the roof replacement and those elements for the better option. So it's more of a visual to give those that are watching tonight or have those that have access to the presentation to get that high level overview of the better option. Next slide, please. So here's the high level comparison in terms of what the good and the better option have. Obviously the lighting controls, the weatherization, many of the elements in the good option really are meaningful projects for the town, for the schools, that hit many of the elements around the sustainability committee's mission around driving down carbon element. The better option obviously requires more investment, but still has a significant impact on the CO2 reductions for the town. One has a positive cash flow, budget positive, the other one is a negative cash flow. So it's those elements that we collectively will work through, but there's the high level comparison that we want to highlight as a part of this presentation. And I think the last slide is, so we do view ourselves and we hope to get there with the town and with the schools as the long-term strategic partner of the town of Westford. We intend to move forward with the investment grade audit based upon the timeline that Beth had presented back in July to the board, and we will do all we can to meet those milestones so we can potentially get on the warrant if it's the desire of this board, meet with all the respective stakeholders to get their engagement and their understanding, their thorough understanding of the projects that we potentially be presenting at town meeting. And we understand the financial constraints that the town's seeing. Dan and Eric have been abundantly clear about the financial hurdles that are coming up over the next couple of years, and we're sensitive to those. We're an extension of your team. We're able to implement and execute work at the town's desires, and we just want to leave no doubt that there's going to be a lot of open items, like I had mentioned with the sustainability committee. We fielded about 20 to 30 questions both during the meeting and following the meeting. We may not have all the answers now, but by nature of the investment grade audit process itself, a lot of those answers are going to come to fruition and be visible to all the stakeholders engaged. We do recommend, in the spirit of collaboration, that the budget neutral project is a meaningful project, and we do ask you do consider that as a viable path forward, knowing that it's not one bite at the apple. We're here for the town. We can do multiple phases at the town and at the school's discretion, whether it's next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. We can work with you and the team and Beth to ensure that the structural arrangement of the contract allows the town, allows the schools to move forward in a meaningful and a thoughtful manner. You don't have to do everything at once. And if you have any questions, comments, we do appreciate the time. I'm sorry not to be there in person tonight. I do hope to see you all in person in the very near future. And any questions, comments, and concerns, we're here.
Great, thanks, Dan. Questions from the board? John?
Yeah, Dan, it looks to me like when you're talking about the carbon reduction, that if we go better, that's only about if we go good, that's 87% of what we can gain, and we'd only get another 13% or so if we went to the better option with those additional, because the better option, a lot of that is tied up in that roof and in the air handling units. So would it make sense, could we go ahead, for example, and select the good option and move on, and then say address the real capital need of the better option in conjunction with all the other budget considerations that we're coming up with, and then if it fits in there and we're going to be able to come up with the money for that capital, then we could engage you in that later on. Is that a possibility?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess one of my reads on this, Dan, is just like the Blanchard roof hit an end of life and needed a major capital project, Westford Academy roof and air handling systems are on death's door. So one thing I've asked Kristen to look into, and I'm not sure if there's an easy way to do this, is if just in our normal course of action, that project would come up anyway, and we would have to do it anyway. And so I guess I'm trying to get a sense of how much extra we'd be paying for all the benefits that this program would bring in the way you're doing it versus if we handled it in sort of the traditional way that we replace school roofs and equipment like that. Because I have a feeling that there's a big portion, 80–90% of the cost of what you're representing here as the delta for the better option is something that's coming anyway. It's a train that's coming anyway to us because we're going to have to fix that roof and that air handling stuff anyway. So I think it would be helpful for the public to know we're going to be doing that. It's going to cost about the same, or it's going to cost incrementally different. That's the delta that we're talking about. And maybe we address it next year, maybe we address it in 2 years, but that's happening. I feel like there's a lot of just necessary infrastructure that's buried in there that we're going to have to pay for anyway. It's not all, energy, non-payback energy spending. It's some of it's just essential CapEx spending that we're going to have to do anyway.
Yeah, in absolute. So to answer your question, we can do that at a future time. We can also provide you with an analysis of comparing using this procurement vehicle to implement that work and give you a general comparison to what 149 may look like. We've done that in the past with the town, and we're happy to provide those analyses to help you make a fully informed decision so you can decide whether or not you want to go the route of our partnership or use an alternative procurement vehicle. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. I wasn't being very articulate. I guess I'm just trying to crystallize the part of this that we're going to have to do anyway and come up with an estimate of cost.
Yeah.
And so we'll figure out a way to do that so we can represent to the taxpayers. Just like the Blanchard roof had to be done, this had to be done. It's going to cost a certain amount. Here's what we're talking about to make it energy efficient. Here's the delta. So we'll have that at some point in the future. Other questions for these folks tonight? Go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to say, I apologize for interrupting. I think the important piece is when you replace the roof, which, as Dan indicated, and Jeff can certainly attest to it. When you replace the roof, which is needed at that time, when you're removing the air handlers, that's really the time to look at what the next solution is. Are you doing a one-for-one replacement of those air handlers with new equipment that will have 20, 30 years of useful life in front of it, or are you looking to move toward that next step of partial electrification and integrate newer technology, that heat pump technology that will allow you to reduce your carbon footprint at that building at the same time? So those two decisions really are decisions that you want to make in concert. And then, of course, if you're looking to further electrify, offsetting your new electric load with solar PV is a natural progression. So it's almost an opportunity to really look at this as a collaborated solution for your overall building. I think the other piece of it that's not blended into any of these costs, the state has put forth, the legislature put forth about $50 million to help support roof replacement projects, the details of which are still in the working sections. But once those applications come out, having an opportunity to look at a project like this and submitting an application for funding for roof replacement better positions the town, I think, rather than just a straightforward, we need to replace our roof. That program is designed exclusively to support renewable generation.
Great, that's good to know, Beth.
That makes sense.
Any other questions tonight?
Mike is here. I don't know if he has
Hey, Mike.
anything to add.
Yeah, please, come on up, Mike.
Thank you. Mike Berlinski as Chair of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. I just wanted to, again, thank Beth and the folks from Amoresco and Town Manager's Office for giving us the preliminary report that we've gone through and spending time with us to answer our questions. As has been mentioned, we do still have some questions and some concerns. You know, for example, we might have a concern that the incentives from state and federal government may be underestimated, which then may be that the cost would be overestimated. So we just want some time to talk through concerns like that, as well as other questions about, you know, what are the opportunities to phase and the opportunities to maybe move some measures between good and better. So we would appreciate if we could have some more time with the Town Manager's Office and Beth to talk through those. And so we do have a meeting next week to try and resolve, and come up with a position to then send our suggestion to you. So we hope that you can wait until after that to make a decision. And we otherwise would want to go as fast as we can to get to town meeting. It'd be great to get to annual town meeting because we want to see all these measures put in place so we can save energy and money. So thanks for your consideration.
Yeah, Mike, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. We definitely want to hold off and wait to get your recommendation before we take a position. So this is sort of a short interim update. We look forward to your recommendation and discussion, and we'll schedule that in a meeting very soon after your meeting.
Yeah, great, thank you.
As early as the 10th, if you'd like, if they're ready to go.
Sooner's good, because we are up against timeline to get the IGA done to support
A
a
town
warrant
meeting vote, yep.
article. Yep. Okay. We good for now?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
so we'll bring this back. Thank you very much. I think you laid it out in a clear way, and it's very helpful for us to understand the options, and we'll look forward to having a deeper discussion on the 10th.
So, I'm sorry, Tom.
Yep.
So to your earlier comments about the Westford Academy improvements, I think, we heard that there was a possibility that these folks could provide some estimate of, what it would take to do the project of replacing the roof and the air handlers through normal process of appropriating the funds and using state bids versus doing it with them.
Right.
I assume, are we giving them the nod to do that work? So we'll have that information for the next time we have this conversation come up?
I'm interested in that. Is that
Sure.
the pleasure of the board?
think
Yeah, I
so.
think as soon as you're able, we'd like to see that, because we could, for instance, say, when that item comes up, we want to pre-commit to doing it one way versus the other, maybe the more energy efficient way. So we'd like to have that opportunity. So yes, if you could have that ready, that would be great. If it's not ready on the 10th, when we next get together, when it is ready, we'd like to take a look at that. Does that sound good to you, Dan? So we're asking, this is the 149
It does.
versus,
It would
okay.
be beneficial to us to understanding that, Mike and the Sustainability Committee are gonna get together next week and review, and we'll certainly be at the ready to address any comments, questions, concerns that come up between now and then. In understanding of the timing, assuming we get an affirmative endorsement from the Sustainability Committee to move forward with a project, the sooner we can get started on the audit, obviously, is mission critical for us. So we don't get in a position where we're, our backs are up against the wall leading into January. So as much information that we can provide between now, Monday, and the upcoming select board meeting to either authorize or pause work, especially if we're gonna move forward. I just wanna make sure that we're organized on our side, and we've got Zach ready to go. So we appreciate your time. That's the biggest sensitivity that we have on our side, ensuring that we deliver a high quality product that's investment grade, that the town can bring to town meeting with full confidence in the project that we developed itself. So
Yeah, our goal on the 10th, or potentially the next meeting, but hopefully the 10th, is to give you the guidance you need to kick off the IGA. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for being here tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the update on the solid waste and recycling contracting for fiscal year 25 through 29.
Sure, thank you. So the last time we were before you related to solid waste and recycling for fiscal year 25 through 29, we had a proposal from Waste Management. There was 2 bidders that came in under the bid. Waste Management was the low bidder. They were proposing to distribute carts that the town would buy. We were talking about, would the trash carts be 32 gallons or 64 gallons? That would be picked up on a weekly basis, and that recycling would be picked up on a bi-weekly basis at 96-gallon totes, and those would be distributed. We also had the conversation of how those with existing totes would get their totes returned or recycled and whatnot. Over the course of the last few weeks and the work that the Budget Task Force has been doing, we reached out to another trash hauling vendor who was able to give us a quote, and we're able to do this because the Mass General Law procurement does not require solid waste and recycling contracts to go through the same type of procurement that any other supplies or services or bidding goes towards. And this hauler was able to give us a raw estimate of a quote with manual collection, so similar to what you have now. It would be 3-barrel limit, every week collection for solid waste, every other week recycling collection, unlimited recycling. And so similar, no changes really to the program. In the future, you could implement a pay-as-you-throw system with bags that people would buy. That's, again, yet to be seen. So right now, we have not signed the contract with Waste Management. This hauler that we are looking at now is coming in about $1.7 million over the course of a 5-year contract under what Waste Management has provided. The majority of that savings is due to the carts, because purchasing the carts would be over $900,000 on the first purchase, and then purchasing throughout the course of that contract for new homeowners. We did meet with Waste Management on Friday, as we wanted to give them the benefit of being able to match the offer that we received. So they are going back to the drawing board and reviewing their numbers. So I wanted to provide an update to the board and to the members of the public today that we are trying to do everything we can to bring solid waste and recycling down. We know that's one of the major cost drivers leading to the Budget Task Force work. And we hope to have some more information and a framework to present to you on October 10th to go forward. Either hauler does need the lead time to order trucks and line up routes and equipment, but we want to make sure that we're providing the best services that we can for the Westford residents and for the taxpayers related to that. So happy to answer any questions on a high level. I don't have the details right now. We're still working through it, but wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that this evening.
Chris?
7 million savings over 5 years sure sounds pretty good given our
that's
budget
right.
situation.
Yeah. So this other hauler, how much would it be compared to what we currently pay?
Dan, do you have those numbers lined up?
We're going to give Dan a second. We'll give Dan a second to come up with that number. Any other questions on this while Dan's digging that up?
You answered my question on how the procurement was working.
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing, I mean, the only feeling I have is, I mean, first of all, we got to take the win, but there was something that one of the focuses that comes out of the budget task force is that we generate 17% more trash than our neighbors in the Commonwealth who collected the curb, and that needs attention. So I'm hoping that we can pair some sort of real focused community education, because we're not going to have the forcing function of just the new regime forcing you to be more efficient. I fear that in 5 years we're going to be just as inefficient as we are now if we don't do something. So there's a real budget benefit to us to reduce that waste tippage. So that's my only take is I just want to make sure we pair it with some sort of aggressive program. And I don't have a clear idea of what that is, but we can define
an
it.
answer right here.
Hi, Ellen, please.
Ellen Hardy, 39 Main Street. Number one, thank you for going back and looking at this again. I've been on the Recycling Commission since it started in 1988, and a lot of the feedback we got to this new proposal was the amount of changes and what people have gotten used to. So thank you for looking at another solution. Your question about why we generate so much waste, this is what the Recycling Commission spends all its life thinking about. And I would ask the board to consider this. We are the only town that I know of that considers a couch the same as a banana peel. And I don't know why we do that, and I don't know how we fell into that, because we didn't start doing that when we started with curbside trash collection in 1988 and then curbside recycling. But the idea that you buy the $800 couch, but for $5 the town will take it away, I've never understood that. It's my couch, and I should be financially responsible. That's part of running a house. If we could take those, what we gently call bulk items, out of our waste stream, I think you'd see that 17% just disappear overnight. And it's hard to quantify because we never ask the trash hauler to say how many of those couches he picks up, but you drive out by people who have their entire living room suite out with a little green sticker on each one. That's neither economically efficient, and that as I say, I don't remember how we fell into this, but it's certainly not a good mindset. You make sure you take your papers out of the trash, you take your glass out of the trash, but you put your furniture out of curbside. I hope we'll factor all of that in and decide how because the new contract's the perfect time to do it. Mm-hmm. If you say to the trash hauler, we're not doing bulk stickers, or limit what bulk stickers are for, people need to know that before July 1. And they can't buy 25 on June 30th and put everything out from the living room that day. We just have to have people think differently about what's the homeowner's responsibility and what's the town's responsibility. Historically, we pick up trash because it was a health hazard in the 1930s. People threw everything in the backyard. Now it's morphed in anything I don't need, the town will take it away. I think we can all look at that closely, and I know the Recycling Commission is.
I have a question for him.
Yep, go ahead.
What do other communities do?
That's, most of them, you call a contractor, you call I've Got Junk, or you call a company, and you hire to have it taken away. It's the homeowner's cost. But I'm sure, now that I'm off the Recycling Commission, I can say the Recycling Commission would be delighted to do this homework. But that's what we do, and I'm still a part of that work, even though I don't go to the meetings every month. So we can do that research for you, John, and find out exactly what other committees, communities do. But it sure is worth looking into, because I just drive around and I see ka-chink, ka-chink, ka-chink when we're paying per ton at the incinerator for what goes in the trash truck. Okay, thanks. I'd love to work with you on that.
Thanks, Alan. So I'll be in touch with Ken, and also whoever's doing trash for the budget task force may actually already know what other bulk approaches are. So we'll pull that together, but it's a great idea. So thank you for bringing that forward. Dan?
To answer Chris's question, the increase for recycling and solid waste FY24, FY25 is about $439,000, which is still substantial. But the outlying years in the new proposal only go up by about $58,000 per year. So where in waste management, they spread out the cost, so it was going up a lot higher year after year.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
So it's still not the Acme deal, but much, much better.
Does sound so, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this before we... So, Kristen, this will come back after you've had a chance to boil this down.
We need to flesh out the numbers, yes.
Okay. We'll see this again. Next up is special town meeting, which is coming up Monday, October 16th. Wow. So tonight we're going to review and act to close the warrant, sign the warrant, finalize motions and take positions. Now, we have more time than this. We don't have to take positions on everything tonight. We can do
No,
it
you have
up
the
until-
10th, up until
on
the
the
10th.
too.
And
Okay.
even if you needed, right before town meeting, we can post you a meeting at 6:45 on the 16th if you need, if something changes.
Okay, so for us, if there are questions that people have, or we want Scott's input in the discussion, we can not take a position, but if we're ready to, we can.
Yep.
Okay.
And there is one article, Article 4, that we really want to have a careful consideration this evening of, do we include it or not on the warrant, based upon cost estimates that came back. So tonight, you do need to vote to sign the warrant to meet our statutory timeframe leading up to town meeting to post that warrant, but the recommendations can wait.
Okay, great. How would you like to walk through
All right.
this, Kristen?
So I'll have Dan present the articles one by one. We also have moderator Harkness here to answer any questions, and I can supplement in that fashion. We might have others joining. Ms. Hardy is here for Article 7. She also has a placeholder for item number 11 on our warrant or on our agenda this evening, so you can decide whether to take her presentation under consideration while you're going through the warrant or as a separate matter on there. So I'll turn it over to Dan to get started.
Sure. Eric, if we go to Article 1. All right, so this Article 1 is to approve fiscal year 2024 budget adjustments. The first two we see here for $215,000 total is being raised and appropriated. We did have some additional budget capacity within our FY24 budget after state aid was finalized and our local revenue closed out higher than anticipated. We're asking for $50,000 for legal services. This is because of unforeseen need for counsel due to the firearms bylaw that we've been working on, and also the MBTA communities that is coming up. So last year we did decrease the budget from $125,000 to $90,000 this year, not knowing those things would be coming. So we're asking for $50,000 to be restored to make it through the year. And then of course we have the recycling expenses for $165,000. This is for the processing fees. As you know, in the past, this has always been highly volatile. July 2022, we're actually receiving money because the price of recyclables was so good. Since then, we had the cardboard mixed paper market crash last fall, and then just in August, the plastic market crashed as well. So we're paying about $83 per ton right now to process recyclables. We're estimating we'll need about $165,000 to make it through the year to keep that program going.
Any questions for Dan on these?
I'll move to recommend.
We have 3 more items in this article.
I
If you-
thought those were the only 2. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
2 more.
And you actually answered my question. I want to make sure we had the Finance Committee input. Looks like we do, so.
Yes.
Super.
The next and further here is for $950,000 from free cash to supplement the health insurance trust. We've had discussions about how poorly we've been actually running the past 2 years. We've had over double the number of high claims that we had anticipated, and we actually finished fiscal year 23 with a $387,000 deficit. The Health Insurance Trust voted a couple weeks ago to increase the rates for employees by 15%, and we're estimating, actually we're raising 15% against recommendation from our health insurance broker to increase them 22%. So not an easy decision to be made, but we do know that trust is in trouble at this point in time. We're asking to supplement the trust by $950,000 at this town meeting, with the caveat that we keep an eye on it from month to month and see how we're trending. We may need to supplement again in March, but we didn't want to raise to 22% without at least monitoring how we're running. The last 3 months have been somewhat better. We only ran at a $95,000 supplement, or deficit, I should say. So that is some good news, but we're still not in great fiscal shape with this right now. So I'll pause after each one in case people have questions. Or
Yeah, I think we've been aware that that's an item of concern, so thanks, Dan.
all right. The next one is actually to reduce the debt service budget by $920,400. We had budgeted a debt payment for 51 Main Street, which did not pass. And we also budgeted some short-term interest for the J.B. Fletcher Library, which they don't need in FY24. They're using a grant right now to fund the design. So rather than let this stay out there, we'd rather reduce the budget because it was supposed to be backed by excluded debt. so, which we can't raise now in the recap because those weren't authorized. We didn't borrow the money. And so if this article fails, we left Article, it's 4 on there, to reduce the free cash, just in case we can apply funds so we have a balanced budget. It's actually Article 5. And then the last one is $60,000 from Stormwater Enterprise retained earnings. As I'm sure you all know, we had that sinkhole over on East Prescott Street after the flooding last week. And this was the estimate from DPW on what they need to supplement their budget to pay for the repairs.
And I just want to add to this, we have filed with the state to potentially be reimbursed for this amount of dollars, but if the state does not come through with that storm-related reimbursement, we want to make sure we have it available here out of the Stormwater Enterprise account.
Any questions on this one? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
No? Move to recommend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Number 2?
So this is appropriating the opioid settlement funds. This is an article that we'll see for the next 15 years or so as we receive the cash in. We just want to appropriate it so it doesn't close out the free cash at the end of the year. This runs similar to how perchlorate works, where we just have a separate fund, separate budget set up within the general fund. And as soon as the money comes in, we'll appropriate it. So we did receive just over $22,000 this year that we are asking to put into that separate account.
Questions? Entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So capital, we're holding off for now because capital planning committee is still waiting on a couple quotes for some projects, so they have not weighed in on those projects yet. Article 4, should we go to that, Kristen?
We should go to Article
Okay.
4, yes.
Which is the Senior Center HVAC project.
So we have Jeff Goodwin on the line if we need, but bids did come back, and they are even higher than what we expected and what we got back for. Well, we did not get a bid from last time, so we didn't have it on the warrant for March, but it would require an additional almost $3 million appropriation, which we don't think we can do within the levy limit, so it would be a debt exclusion. That is on top of the $1 million that was already appropriated, as well as $300,000 in state ARPA, and I believe $500,000 in local ARPA dollars. So we know that we had
So we're at like almost 5 million?
almost $5 million for an HVAC
See,
project.
I can do
with-
math
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
5 million, oh.
I mean, the building's not worth $5 million.
Yeah.
So,
What's the proposed course of action from here?
So we believe that the past few years they've been using the window units, and those have been successful. They may not be the most energy efficient, but we have not received complaints. Due to the budgetary constraints that we've seen, we don't feel on the staff side that it would be prudent to ask the voters to pay for the additional $2.98 million on top of the $1.9 million that was already appropriated for an HVAC system project. I would like to use some of the funds available to upgrade the restroom on the second floor that was necessary and some other ancillary things, but those would be nowhere near this large ticket item. So my recommendation would to not have this on the town meeting warrant and to go back to the drawing board and look for alternate solutions.
I think that's,
Any comments?
just clear, so the other upgrades you want to just ballpark, 100,000, 500,000, like what are we
Let me
talking?
see if I can get Jeff on.
so what's their situation for this winter?
So they have heat.
It's the air conditioning.
It's the air conditioning, is my
Okay.
understanding, that's the issue. So we have Jeff joining. He can probably give a better understanding of the cost
I
related.
think you
to
probably
this
answered
one.
this, but just, there were a bunch of things that were sort of not great about the facility. It sounds like you're addressing some of them or planning to, like the bathroom.
Yeah,
Is there any, I guess, is the window unit solution sort of workable, safe, acceptable from your point of view?
So Jeff, would you mind weighing in on some of those questions, please?
Yeah, good evening. So the window unit solution is, it's not optimal, it's not what we prefer. Obviously, as a facilities person, when you have equipment in the building that's not functioning properly, you want to try and repair it. I think that the PTBC reps and the Clean Energy Committee came up with a really great design for the proposed HVAC project, but in this construction climate, it just doesn't make sense to pursue it at that price tag at this point. The heat in the building works great, no issues there. And the portable AC units seem to be holding us by for the time being. We haven't received any complaints about being warm in the building the last couple of summers. I think, maybe down the road, we'd like to revisit what a feasible plan looks like for that particular building. Perhaps when the financial climate gets a little better.
And Jeff, could you weigh in on if we were to just go forward with the restroom renovations and perhaps the small other renovations that were included in this bid, what a ballpark cost on that would be?
I would venture to say that we could probably get the bathroom done for under 50 grand.
So,
Go ahead, John.
so we could use ARPA funds or some part of that to do it, and that way we wouldn't, we'd help the town meeting approval.
Correct.
Wouldn't tap into that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the plan is sort of to regroup with an option that is sort of a bridge option that gets us through. This is sort of a fly ball question, Jeff, but I'm thinking of like mini splits that, if you put, 10 new mini split units in strategic locations, does that get you anywhere, or are the window units just fine? Because that would be a lot lower cost than $5 million.
I think that would be a great option for some of the rooms. I know Jennifer reached out to me the other day, last week. She was having an event in the multi-purpose room, which is a larger room. It is currently being serviced by a couple of portable units, and it's really just too large of an area for them to adequately cool the room. So I think that would be a great candidate for some mini splits, and I think where it's located on the back of the building, I think we could do that without it really being an aesthetic issue as far as having piping running along the exterior of the building. So I do think that would be an option for some spaces, but I think that we want to be very careful about how we do that, not to ruin the historical look of the building.
Okay, so the proposal here is to pull it from town meeting and come back with a bridge plan that probably will include the bathroom and maybe some other things. Is that what the board feels is right?
I think that's a good move.
Okay.
$5 million.
All right.
All right, let's
We can't spend $5 million.
Let's proceed in that direction. Do we need to vote to remove this?
You don't need to vote to remove it because you have not set the numbering of the articles, so we'll do that at the end. You'll now have a 9 article warrant.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the now Article 5, Dan.
All right.
Soon to be Article 4.
So this one, we're actually asking you to recommend dismissal of this article. This is a placeholder only in case Article 1 fails and we don't reduce the debt service budget. If that's the case, we have to apply one-time funds here in order to balance the budget. If we don't keep this and Article 1 fails, we may have to call another special town meeting to set the budget. So this is purely precautionary.
Okay, so this stays, and do we go ahead and vote then to recommend dismissal, but it stays on the warrant, and we decide that day?
Yes, the Finance Committee did
Okay.
that as well, but if something changes with Article 1, we can always make a new recommendation.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to recommend dismissal.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Article 6, rescind authorized and unissued debt. This is really a cleanup article that we have every 4, 5, 6 years. These are not real dollars going back to the town. These,
Bummer.
I know.
Dan, come on, man.
I looked at this,
Wish I
thought,
had
ooh.
better news. This is money that we authorized but did not borrow, so we just want to take away that authorization so nobody can borrow under these town meeting votes for these projects.
Okay, any questions?
I'll move to recommend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You.
I think for 7, it probably does make sense to proceed and then come back unless there's something procedural about this. Because Ellen has a nice,
Do you want to skip over
as a
and
spot
do
following.
the rest
that
and
we
then
can
go back
dig
to
in.
7?
Yeah. So why don't we do that, Dan?
Okay, skip over this one?
Skip over this one
Okay.
because we're going to come back to have a longer discussion on it.
Sure. Article 8 is authorization for the select board to petition the general court for special legislation to amend the town's Means-Tested Senior Citizen Property Tax Exemption Act. So this was the legislation that the Slider Committee had put forward, I want to say 3 years ago, to town meeting, where we're trying to have it so for seniors who have lived in town for 10 or more years, they didn't pay more than 10% of their income towards property taxes. So the program has been successful. The first year, we actually had 18,000 in exemptions granted in FY22. Then in FY23, we had 25,000 in exemptions granted, which is great. We're helping a lot of people. We did have a couple of recommendations on the original legislation. The first one was that the current legislation has set the maximum home value at 80% of the average single-family residential property. And there are a lot of people that didn't apply because their house was just assessed a little bit too high over that. And so our assessor estimates that we could help possibly 10 to 15 more people if we put it at 100% of the average single-family residential value. That's the biggest proposal we have, just to reach a few more people in town, if the board was acceptable to that. And then we also just reworded some language that felt a little confusing on there, that the state had in there. And then we're changing selectmen to select board, because this occurred before that change on our end. And we want to delete the sunset clause, which expires the legislation after 3 years. So it would be permanent at this point. What would happen is if this passes at town meeting, we would send it off to the legislature, and then it would most likely be on the October ballot for approval. And it'll be in place for next year if timing goes well.
Okay, do you need a position on the 100% versus 80% ceiling?
That would be fantastic, just to be.
Okay, why don't we
fair.
take that first? Any comments or feelings from the board? I'd be in support of doing that.
Yep.
Sure.
Do we need a vote? Why
I
not?
think
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then now you need a recommendation position on the whole thing.
Can I just ask a question? You
Yeah,
said
I'm
removal
sorry,
of the
I didn't mean to
sunset clause.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the Slider Committee proposed that this only be enacted for the 3 years, so we could see how it performed, and it would force us to come back and make changes as we saw fit. So we're in year 3 right now. So if we don't make a recommendation now, then we wouldn't have this legislation in place for next year.
The sunset clause, though, so we're asking to not have to go back 3 years from now to do this
3
again.
years now.
So we'd have to have it on the town meeting warrant to review it, approve that, go back to the legislature, and then go back to a town vote at an election. So the request here is to not have a sunset clause, or if the board doesn't feel that that's adequate, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the board thinks
We
is
can always
appropriate.
There's a provision, I think, even still within there that says that if we no longer want to do it, say 5 years from now, that we have the authority to then rescind it, right?
Yes.
Right,
through
we
town
don't
meeting.
lose anything
Right.
by getting rid of the sunset
As
clause.
long as we have that authority to go back and revisit this at some
Yeah.
point,
Oh, yeah.
at our
Yeah.
discretion, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Just want to have that flexibility. Thank you for that
Okay.
information.
There's not an easy way, Dan, is there, to know what % of people who are eligible are taking advantage of this? Just because it's, as we get into this whole budget thing, a lot of the question is, where does the burden fall? Do we have good programs to make sure we're supporting people who've got limited means? This is a great program in that category. I'd love to know if we feel like we need to communicate more so more people who are eligible get it, or if we feel like we've actually covered it pretty well. So maybe this isn't something you can answer tonight, but something I'm curious about.
We did grant 13 exemptions in FY22 and then 21 in FY23, so there's more word of mouth getting out there, I believe. But again, it's pretty restrictive at this point.
Because of the value.
Because of the value.
And the 10 years.
And the 10 years residency within Westford. And they also have to file for circuit breaker first. That's really how we know if they qualify for this or even eligible for it. So they have to qualify with that with the state first. So even if we tell residents that they need to apply for circuit breaker, if they think they qualify, or, they can talk to our assessors, council on aging, whoever can answer those questions, but that's really our litmus test if you qualify for this. But, we've had 21 last year. If we get another 10, 15, that's up to about, 31 to 36 people, and I'm sure there's more out there that would probably qualify. We just don't have the data.
Okay.
publicly available.
Okay, got it, thanks, Dan. John?
You had quite a few more applicants, though. Some of them were turned down, right? So how
Yes.
many applicants did you have?
Yep, so 13 out of 25 in FY22 and 21 out of 30 in FY23.
Okay.
But it's worth applying if people want to see if they qualify.
So you think raising that to 100%, will that affect that at all?
Yeah, we think
people
10
will
to
be
15 more people will qualify.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Dan on this one? I'll entertain.
Move to recommend.
Thank you. Andrea?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Number 9.
All right, this is just administrative to authorize the school bus transportation contract for 5 years. This is just following mass procurement law that, any contracts we think they might do better to have a longer time period because the company has to buy capital. We do this with trash and recycling. We'll get better bids if we can have a longer contract, so.
Okay, and the reason we need to do this is ordinarily they can only do up to 3 or something?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Any comments on this? I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Number 10.
Number 10 is amend the zoning bylaw to define and regulate firearm businesses and related terms. We do have some recommended language up there. At the very end, it says, as shown on the handout titled Town of Westford Planning Board and Select Board Motion for, which will be Article 9 now, for the October town meeting. Jeff Morissette and Joe Jinowitz came up with that language today, and they wanted to check with you to see if that was amenable to you as a title for the handout.
Any concerns about the title? Looks good.
Okay.
Now, oftentimes we would wait for our sister board to take a position before we would. In this case, we're jointly sponsoring it, so I guess we could go either way. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is.
So we should just do it.
I'm prepared to make a motion to recommend it.
Okay, excellent.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so before we move on to the presentation associated with what was Article 7, which now is going to be Article 6, I would recommend that you just vote to close the warrant, number the warrant, and sign the warrant, just so we button that up before you hear the presentation, but I'm willing to take other recommendations that the
Okay.
board may
Any
see
other,
fit.
any other questions before we do that?
No, I think we just, as common courtesy, we ask the moderator if she is okay with the order of the articles on the warrant.
Yes, please. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Okay, I will entertain a motion to close the warrant
So moved.
and finalize, what else am I doing?
Finalize the numbers, sign the warrant, and finalize the motions.
That.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, super. Okay, I think we are ready to move on to discussion of the proposed historic preservation restriction and affordable housing restriction related to acquisition redevelopment of former Caldwell Banker property. So Ellen, if you'd like to come up to the mic.
Great, and then you can choose to make a recommendation on this article tonight, or we can hold it till October 10th, whatever you're.
Okay, my inclination is, because I'd like to hear Scott's take on this from affordable housing, would be probably to wait, but we can, love to hear what you have to say.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Ellen.
Thank you very much. I guess I'll do this in 2 parts. The first, just to speak to why I am before you tonight asking for your support on this article. The genesis of this article is that I think goes back 7 years ago, when Mike and I, my husband and I, bought the Wright and Fletcher General Store at 40 Main Street. And we bought that building for 2 reasons. We didn't want the historic integrity of the building changed at all. It was built in 1837 as a general store, and we wanted it to look that way forever. And it also has 5 apartments in it. And we know all those people because they live across the street from us. And we didn't want it condominiumized and have those people who were paying very reasonable rents to suddenly not be able to afford to live there. That experience has taught us that the demand for apartments in Westford, for people who want to stay in this town, who grew up here, who've lived here and are downsizing, to be able to stay here is so, so great. There just are not enough apartments. So when the Coldwell Banker building became vacant, exactly 2 years ago, it was the fall of 2021 now, that they moved their offices out. Like everyone else in town, we looked at that building and thought, what's gonna happen there? And after it had been empty for 8 or 9 months, I said to Mike, is there any chance in the world that we could do with the Drew Farmhouse what we have at 40 Main Street? Could we make it a truly workforce affordable housing? And we didn't know that term was legal, that it existed. But this housing production plan, which you approved just a year ago, in fact, one of the goals here is to have housing for workforce. And that's people with jobs, don't qualify for Section 8, but they can't afford to live in this town. So we went to the Affordable Housing Committee. We've been working with them for almost a year now to say, with this demographic, which we're losing everybody between the ages of high school and 55, would workforce affordable housing qualify for CPC money? They looked into that and they found that in fact it does. HUD qualifies that, and so does the CPC. So at that point, Mike and I, in earnest, began the process of getting the property approved for 5 apartments in the farmhouse, and the Zoning Board of Appeals granted us that unanimously in May of 2023. We've been to the Planning Board, who have unanimously approved the site plan. We've been to the Conservation Commission, who have unanimously approved the project. The Affordable Housing unanimously supports it, and so does the Historic Commission. That's the homework that we have been doing for the last 8 months. But unlike the Wright and Fletcher building, which Mike and I were able to finance ourselves because it came with 5 apartments and 5 tenants, Coldwell Banker is 40 real estate cubicles. In 1994, Coldwell Banker went to the Board of Appeals and got a variance to move the real estate office, which had been just in the barn, into the entire farmhouse. And it was gutted. All the walls were taken out. There's nothing there but little cubicles where realtors have sat for the last 40 years. So this is a much bigger project, and we can't do that alone. So that's when we came to the town to say, can we partner with you? Because community preservation money is there for affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space. So what we're asking you to support and what we're asking town meeting for on the 16th of October, now Article 6, although all of our propaganda says Article 7, but we'll go back to the drawing board, is to ask for $1 million in affordable housing money and $450,000 in historic preservation money. And let me stop there, because obviously there will be deed restrictions on this property. And that is the next agenda item. So let me just talk to Article 7 specifically about those 2 things, answer your questions about the financing, and then we can get into the deed restrictions and how the money would actually be used in the most effective way to get the most bang for the buck for both your money and also the money Mike and I are putting in to back this financially.
Okay, Chris?
Just for the purpose of people, who are watching tonight, can you talk a little bit about the Drew Farmhouse Incorporated and how that plays into the whole
Thanks very
conversation?
much. Yep. So 2 things that I left out of the formula. In June, we made an offer on the property. We were the only person to have placed an offer in the year and a half it had been on the market at that point in time. And in July, we incorporated in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts a charitable nonprofit called the Drew Farmhouse, Inc. And that will be the owner of the property. Mike and I will not own it. It will be the Drew Farmhouse. For the elephant that's in the room, Mike and I do not stand to make any money on this project. It is entirely a nonprofit. The time that we are giving, we are volunteering. I will be the project manager as a member of the board of directors, but we will have no paid staff. There will be no one salaried. It's very important to us that because this is taxpayer money, half of it is taxpayer money, it will be $1 million that we're putting up and $1 million the town is putting up. It's very important that we use Westford contractors. Our general contractor is a Westford business. Our architect lives in Westford. Our attorney was born and raised in Westford. Our Land Tech is in Westford, so we really want these dollars to stay within these 30 square miles, and that's our goal. So that's the Drew Farmhouse. We only have a purchase and sale signed at this point. It's contingent on the town meeting funding. And without that, to be perfectly honest, the project is dead in the water unless John Bears for Tipton shows up and hands us a check for $1 million. That's for those of you who watched The Millionaire in the 1960s on television. So that's where we are in terms of the organization of the project, and that's where we are in terms of the financing, and it's all contingent on the voters agreeing that that's what they created the Community Preservation Act for this kind of housing and for the historic preservation of the building.
Okay. Andrea?
A couple of questions. I read your press release, and also I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust Committee as well, and I know what you've presented to us. So my understanding when you presented to us was that Habitat for Humanity was going to own 2 units, and now your press release says it's only 1 3-bedroom unit.
Let me back up and do that math for you.
Okay.
We can, by permission that we got from the Board of Appeals, have 7 units between the house and the barn. Per the septic system, we can have 9 bedrooms. So we will have in the farmhouse, and this will be the Drew Farmhouse, Inc., we'll be building out 5 units, 4 single bedroom and 1 2-bedroom. So that eats up 6 of our 9 bedrooms that we can have under the septic rules. What Habitat for Humanity has chosen to do, and this is just within the last 3 weeks they've made this decision, is to do 1 3-bedroom unit in the barn for a family, because that's the demand for their units. They could do a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, but what Habitat provides is homes, not apartments. So they've chosen to take their 3 bedrooms and allocate it for 1, and that's all that will be in the barn. So we still have our 9 bedrooms that the septic system will accommodate, and we have our 7 units, actually only 6, but we have up to 7 that the Board of Appeals allows us. So that has been a change.
Okay. And then the other thing, just for the board's information, one of the things that Ellen asked is if, as part of the Board of Directors, if a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee could be a member, and unfortunately, we asked for a town council opinion, and we cannot because it was considered a conflict of interest for a member of a town committee to then be considering whether or not people who apply would be screening applications and screening finances, and town council said, not so much. So
that would have been a wonderful alliance, and we certainly will turn to you. Our other consultant on this, who's just been tremendously generous with his time, is David Hedison, and there's nobody who knows more about affordable housing in the Merrimack Valley than David. He met with Mike and myself very early on, 3 times, to tell us what our options were, and he will certainly help us. You know, it will be the Board of Directors who will choose who lives there at the request of the Affordable Housing Committee. Although workforce affordable families may earn between 80% and 120% of the area median income. This is all established by HUD. The Affordable Housing Committee asked us to please make 100% the upper limit, so that you need to be in that sort of lower part to qualify for the apartments, and we're pleased to do that. By not taking any federal and state money, which we've done very deliberately, we can favor Westford residents. We can't do that with money that is belongs to everybody, and that's very important to us. It's the Westford people that we know that we want to have be able to stay at 70 Boston Road. So those will be our criteria, the HUD criteria for workforce affordable housing. And if you have been born in Westford, live in Westford, work in Westford, you will definitely be get greater consideration. And to be perfectly honest, that's also been a criteria that I have used as the owner of 40 Main Street, and it feels good.
Other question, John?
The purchase price, that's totally paid for by a loan, or?
That's one of the things that's the other part of why I'm on the agenda tonight. The way that we originally saw this as being financed, John, was that yes, Mike and I would take out the mortgage for the full purchase price. We have paid more for the building than we'd hoped. We thought that Coldwell Banker would think it was a wonderful a thing as we think it is and would give us a break, but that didn't happen. So we're paying $1.1 million, that's public record, for what the building will cost us. Then the amount that we've asked for the $1 million for the housing, that's assuming that there are 5 apartments, and we know that, here's the budget, thank you for that. We are estimating it will be $250,000 per apartment for the 5 workforce affordable apartments, which is right there, and obviously a contingency because things are going up and we'll have some closing costs. So then we were going to use the community preservation funds to actually do the build-out. But if you look at the math, and it's why we're now asking if we can use the community preservation fund to help us pay for the building, if we don't have to borrow money from the bank until we actually start construction in the spring of 2024, we can save up to $20,000 to $30,000, perhaps even $40,000 in mortgage and interest payments that can go right smack dab back into the units and into making the rents even lower. But that's entirely the town's decision. If we consider ourselves equal partners in this, and I hope we are, the Drew Farmhouse on one side, not one side, as one half, and the town of Westford is the other, I hope we don't look at it as our money and your money, that it's the project's money. So at this moment, we're asking if we could actually draw down, if town meeting says yes on the 16th, if we could draw down the CPC money in order to help pay the purchase price at the closing October 27th. We would still take out the $1.1 million loan, but it would go toward the build-out. And that's just a bookkeeping matter, and that's entirely up to this board.
Well, that brings up a concern I had in it, just the way I think the law is written. If the city or town must own any real property interest acquired, it puts in, I think we need to have the general counsel look at this, is if we actually pay to acquire the facility, that brings into some requirements for the town to be involved more deeply.
Council has been involved, thanks to Kristen.
That was my concern. I thought that, I had the 1.4 million or whatever it is would be kind of toward the construction, and that's a grant. And then there are some things about having a grant, a plan. We have to have some kind of agreement.
That's being worked on as well. Yeah.
And then we have to have the. But anyway, that brings another player in that says that the town has to, have some ownership in this, I think. And that's the way I'm reading it. Now, I think we need to take a look at that. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm just concerned about that. And it's $1,450,000, and I want to make sure that we're protecting
So do we.
our investment. So.
The owner of the building will be the Drew Farmhouse, Inc. So if we cannot do the finances to have that be the case, then we'll have to find some other way to, find that balance on the 27th. But if council advises that there is a way that we could use even a portion of the community preservation money toward the purchase price and not have the town be the owner of the building, because we don't want to get into dual ownership. You don't want to own it with us, and we don't want to own it with you, and I love you all a lot. But that just makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I know that the town manager has been in touch with council. He has given some suggestions as to that particular one about ownership is not one we discussed, Kristen, but.
Yeah, that's one of my major questions.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I think you've got a great idea. It's just getting the paperwork right and making sure that the town interests are protected.
Absolutely.
And that's my concern.
Yeah,
And if we're doing it right, and we don't have any questions coming back on us on that.
Yeah, we agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Ellen, I highly doubt this will occur, but let's just say for some reason you're not able to sell or rent out these apartments and you don't get the income stream you're looking for, and next thing you know, you can't afford this property. Where does the town's investment go?
The town's investment isn't responsible at that point. Mike and I in the Drew Farmhouse Committee will have taken that on, the Drew Farmhouse, Inc. and the nonprofit. So that will be the nonprofits project, and Mike and I and the nonprofit will have to figure out. We will not come back to the town for that.
Well, let's say you decide, or the nonprofit decides, we can't keep this afloat and we need to sell the property. Does the portion of the proceeds of the property go back to us and to the town and into the CPA fund balance.
Well, we should talk about that, whether that happens shortly or down the road. My understanding was that, you know, the town was giving us the money, was giving the nonprofit the money to create the units, and those would then belong to the Drew Farmhouse Inc., because you've built the walls and we can't give them back. So let's talk that through, Chris. We had just assumed that it would be like, well, the parallel immediately comes to mind is Town Farm Road. You know, Choice will own that building. The town is giving them $3 million to do what they're going to do. And it just becomes part and parcel of the building. But if that goes belly up, I don't think the town gets the money back from David Hedison and Choice. That's never been mentioned in the negotiations that we've had with him. So I don't really know the answer. I was an assumption I made that just like any other CPC money that you give, it goes to that entity, and like any other appropriation, you buy the fire truck and the money goes to the fire truck company. So we just come to the nonprofit and we would do what we said we'd do with it. So again, I think council needs to be asked that question, but.
I mean, could you write it into the bylaws of the charter of the nonprofit that if you decide to dissolve it and you sell the building, that the proceeds, portion of whatever is remaining.
We'd have to amend the bylaws. It's not in the bylaws that we created when we were established in August 1st, but we could certainly talk about that, Chris, or put some kind of a lien. I have to talk to our attorney, Melissa, about that, because that goes way beyond my capabilities. I have the vision. She works out how to do it legally.
Yeah, it may, that grant agreement might have something to do, say about that. But when the term acquisition comes in, that's where we run afoul of some of the CPA laws as to.
Are you reading from something there, John, that is about the Community Preservation Act, that you could tell me what chapter and verse you're on so I can look that up?
44B.
Of just the whole statute?
12B, and it just says, the city or town must own any real property interest acquired or taken with community preservation. So any property interest acquired. So it's about ownership and management, and then there's acquisition. So it's at 44B, and the different sections in there. Section 12, for example, is one.
I wonder if there's any way, and I'm just thinking out loud and I have no idea, if it was used toward that, obviously the reimbursement could be from the money that we then start taking out. I don't know, we need to look at that. I'm sure that
Section
there's a way
12 talks about real property acquiring.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty specific. If there was some other way to move it around where the grant and the grant agreement was, that would fit it out, then I think we would not be acquiring any ownership of that.
Any interest in it, yeah.
But once you start talking about paying.
Why don't we have council address this
I was
question
going to say, I think council needs,
Yeah.
I think
We're
council
amateurs
needs
at
to,
We'll ask our attorney
I
as
think
well,
Melissa needs to talk to town
Absolutely,
council
yeah,
and
which
they can work
already
it
have.
out.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And we had talked about that
Point.
after this meeting, I would arrange a meeting with myself and KP Law and Ms. Hardy and Melissa to work out all the
Right.
details and then bring that back to you.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to get any questions that you had on the table and any
Well, I think
sentiments
you
that you
answered
had.
my
this evening.
question.
There were a couple of other comments that I think town council also had that I think we need to talk with
Yeah.
council about, so.
Which we have begun that
Right, I
conversation.
know you've begun that conversation,
So
which
do you
makes.
not want to have that conversation now about the environmental assessment and the two things that council brought up? Or do you want to just put that all off?
You talking about the appraisal?
The appraisal and the phase 1 environmental site assessment, yeah.
I guess
Yes, I can address that. We spoke to our lender today as a result of the conversation with council. And he said that they have pre-approved the loan, and I can read you his quote. It was basically based on knowing the Hardys and having been lenders to other properties that we bought. But that by the time it would be actually finalized, they too would ask for an appraisal. They didn't need that for their pre-approval because they knew that we were able to support the loan. But there would ultimately be an appraisal before the closing was done. So I can read you exactly what he says. To answer the town manager's question, our pre-approval, and this is the bank, is conditional upon a full credit review and satisfactory appraisal and environmental due diligence on the property. The pre-approval is usually issued for customers we are familiar with to assist with property purchase negotiations. So that's why we had the pre-approval, but those other steps will be taken before the closing.
Makes sense.
And,
I guess one question that's on my mind, and maybe on other people's minds too, is I was looking back at other projects that CPC has made grants to for affordable housing, and looking at sort of how many dollars of CPC money per unit ended up going in. Really as a way to kind of tip it over into being attractive for choice or for whoever else is doing the development. So I was looking at Town Farm, and it was, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000 of town money per unit. This is like $250,000 of town money per unit. So the concern is not, this sounds like a really important program and meets a critical need. I'm just wondering, as stewards of that money, if we're trying to make sure we're creating as much affordable housing as we can, if this is putting a really large allocation of those limited funds into a relatively small number of units, I guess that's what I'm thinking of, is are we applying good stewardship if, you know, it's many multiples of what we typically do in terms of a CPC allocation on a per unit?
It's a fabulous observation, Tom, and you're absolutely right. But what makes this project different is that we're not accepting state and federal money. And therefore, we don't have that to reduce the per unit cost. And we're doing that because Mike and I so strongly feel that we want it to be for Westford people. And we want to have, you may not know me well, but control.
What a surprise!
So it would be a decision. The first time anyone's mentioned that. So it would be a decision the town meeting wants to make, because for this demographic, for workforce affordable housing, we have done nothing as a town. We've been incredibly generous to the senior housing in town. That's been fabulous. But for this demographic, we have done nothing. And I would argue that it's time that we do. Even though the per unit cost is more, I think that generation deserves it. So you're right, it's more, but I think it's worth every penny.
Yeah, and I find that compelling. It's, yeah, I'll continue to think about that, and I'll continue to do more research on other affordability, because I think you're right. Creating affordability is an important good to future residents of Westford. Creating affordability for current residents is an important goal too. It's just the number that's setting me back on a per unit basis, because you could definitely go out and just acquire a new building, not a new building, but you go out and acquire an existing building, you know, for $250,000 a unit. So it's just it's a very strong allocation of resource, and I guess that's just what the town will have to decide is, you know, if we typically can expand the inventory of affordable housing with $30,000 or $40,000 CPC allocation, here we're doing 250, is that difference meet the good that we're trying to accomplish here? So that's what's on my mind.
The other factor of that is, the other thing that this project is doing that is, you cannot put a price on, is it's saving the George Drew farmhouse. What else is going to happen to that building? Nobody else has wanted it in the last 2 years. It really is the perfect use for it. It was built as a residential, it will again be residential, and from Boston Road it will always look as it is. The new building wouldn't give us that. So that, to me, also is worth the town's investment, to spend a little bit more to preserve the historic building and provide the workforce affordable housing. But town meeting will decide.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Are there other questions tonight? I guess the other question is, I would like to get Scott's input and keep this to the 10th.
Well, I think even if, you know, Scott were here, I would still be saying, I think there are
we need a little more time.
We need some more time. There's still too many outstanding issues, I think, that need to be clarified and worked out between the town and you folks. So I think that regardless, you know.
Regardless, it makes sense to hold off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to hold off until the 10th, you think?
We're going to hold off on the 10th to take a recommendation position. Or I should say, we'll come back and talk about it. We could also wait and take a position at the meeting itself.
I just have two maybe quick questions. So the annual expenses, you have utilities as $2,550. Is that for the entire building for the year?
Could you put that, I'm afraid my financial advisor is at home cooking me dinner, so I'm not as familiar with it.
That just looked very low to me for
Did that have the figure? All of these figures were based on the figures of what we pay at 40 Main Street, so Michael just extrapolated those for that.
The next page.
Go down here.
So
It
that,
has to be per unit.
Yeah, that's,
Annual
those are
expenses
per
per
unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. So I will,
then the math, I don't think
yeah,
makes
then the math
sense.
doesn't work out.
Then the math
I-
doesn't work,
I
yeah.
made a, it's not called a Reader's Digest, yeah, a Reader's Digest version of Michael's longer budget, because I was trying to make it simpler, and I think I may have made an error there, Chris, and let me
Okay.
correct that and find that out,
That's fine.
yeah.
So my follow-up question, Ellen, is, let's say this budget was accurate and
Mm-hmm.
you were coming back with, say $5,000 a year
Mm-hmm.
profit. What happens to that money? What are your plans as a
Oh,
nonprofit?
the farmhouse puts that right into an account that fixes the roof when the roof leaks, and it all goes into the Drew Farmhouse,
But you already
nonprofit.
have a reserve for capital and contingencies in your budget, so
That-
you just
it would
continue to
just be
build on that.
continued,
It
absolutely.
wouldn't go
And-
towards lowering the rent or.
Exactly, and one thing we thought about, we don't even know if this is legal, but that's okay, we'll look into it. Apparently, I've asked you to do some other things that aren't, so let's add a third. It would be really wonderful if we could put something that was a surplus into an escrow account. You have to keep the last month's security deposit for every renter, and you could just quietly squirrel that away so that the people are actually accruing an account, so when they leave, to buy their own home, which is the goal of this, is that they can move on to be homeowners. They actually, it's sort of like a, a co-op kind of a thing, they put in money and they get it back when they leave. That gives them opportunity to make a down payment on a home. We have no idea how we would do that or structure that. But every single dollar that comes in will go to the people who live there and making that building as nice as it can be. That's where it will go.
Would you entertain an idea of potentially pushing some of that money back to CPA?
I've never thought about that. I didn't know there was a way to,
I don't even know
I've
if
never
there is
seen
either.
money
I'm
coming
just-
back
yeah.
in. I'd rather have it go toward the people who are living there to give them the opportunity to move on, but
Yeah, that's a thought.
everything's on the table, so.
I guess also, like you said, if there were a major repair or something that needed
Well,
to
you
be
would,
done.
you would obviously have to maintain
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
contingency and
Yeah.
capital, but,
Yeah.
if this is wildly successful and let's say interest rates on your loan goes from 7% down to 3 or 2 or whatever, right? Eventually that might happen and, we'll see interest rates go down.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just
Well,
saying.
and I guess at some point it also becomes, where is that the Drew Farmhouse Inc.'s concern, and where does the town
Right.
hold our hand, but it's not, how we do is how we do, just like anybody else. So I thank you for your interest, but I don't think you can guide us all the way down to the next 20 years, but we'll take it from there. I will just say, in terms of a clock ticking, we have a presumed closing date for October 27th, and it's contingent on the town meeting article passing. As I said, if it doesn't pass, I guess we own a farmhouse, and I don't know what we're gonna do with it, but we'll figure that out. But if we can work diligently with you over the next 2 weeks to get the wording for the grant agreements and and these are already, council is working on these, and so is our attorney, because we need both the deed restrictions and the grant agreements for both pots of money, for both housing and for historical. So if we can be busy little bees, we'll do anything to help, but we really would love to have it, if it passes the 16th, to not get hung up with dotting i's and crossing t's on legal things, and try and do that in the next 3 weeks. That would be.
Do we need an appraisal or an environmental?
We do, yes.
Before a town meeting as well?
Not before town meeting,
Okay.
but before a closing.
Before closing?
But
before
they will be
closing
asking
is,
that too.
yeah, but
Right.
before
Yeah.
closing is like 10 days after town meetings.
I'd like to speak against requiring an environmental assessment, Andrea. That came up from council, and, it's a residential property that was a farmhouse for 130 years and a real estate office for 40. It's just not a Superfund site. All the work doing is inside. We're doing renovation. We're not digging outside. We're not even putting in a new septic system. I have letters that I got today from Land Tech about, the work they did, and they saw no sign of any environmental concerns, but they're not environmental engineers, they're civil engineers. I just don't see where it would get us, and it was at our expense, I might point out, and that's not what we want to spend our money on, and I don't see where it gets us. There is nothing on that property that is of environmental concern. Our attorney, Melissa Robbins, went to the Mass DEP site today to see if there had ever been any recorded concerns or violations with 70 Boston Road, and there have been none. I would really ask the select board to just take that off the table, and we'll work with you on the appraisal for sure, but the other to me is a complete waste of time and money, and I certainly hope you don't, I know it's council's advice, but you don't have to follow it. And I hope that one you will take right off the table.
We are, as part of the Boston Road reconstruction project, putting a massive retention pond behind that property, which I would think, if anything's gonna disturb, the conditions, that would. Right? I don't think, rehabbing the house is gonna cause.
Maybe they're thinking of lead or,
Well, it could be,
asbestos or
oil
something like
tank
that.
leaks. I'm thinking anybody coming off of Boston Road and parking there and maybe had some sort of release, but we don't know those types of things, so.
That could be true of any home in Westford. I just don't think this should be treated any different than any other residential property, and those seem like extreme, and costly, and time-consuming demands to put on the nonprofit that I really would ask you not to pursue.
I hear,
Since-
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, once you finish this, but since we're going to have this coming back, I suggest that people send their questions to Kristen. We can have a
Fair enough.
robust conversation about this next time, but please continue.
No, I was
didn't mean
just
to
going to
cut you
say, I hear what you're saying, Ellen, but before I take it off the table, I also want to hear from our council,
Yeah.
and reasons, and perhaps Melissa and our council can work something out that is agreeable to both of you, and that maybe isn't a full environmental study or something. So I hear you, and we can, as you said, we can talk about it at our next meeting, but at least tonight, I'm not willing to take it off the table yet.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Let's
Very
go to
informative and very exciting program.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
thank you
Ellen.
Thank you.
thank you and your husband
It's
for
quite a task you're
highlighting
taking
this.
on.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, next up is review and approve budget policy direction for fiscal year '25. So this is very similar. We don't have the red line version, do we?
I don't have that in your packet. I can
Okay.
speak to what
Yeah,
was
maybe
added.
you may remember what
And this was
changes
also
been added.
reviewed with the finance committee, and they have recommended it for you this
Okay.
evening with the red line. So we've added under bullet point 5, which starts attempt to maintain services at current levels, the last sentence and other sentences related to fiscal '25 revenue and free cash, that fiscal '25 will be extraordinarily challenging and require steady communication among select board, school committee, and finance committee to understand the scale of the budget shortfalls and the potential service impacts. The next bullet is new, reflect on ongoing coordination of joint chairs meetings before and during the budget formation process. And the next bullet after that, reflect early consideration and discussion of potential approaches to address budget shortfalls, taking into consideration the recommendations from the budget task force. So those are new or modified from previous years,
And there were a few that came off because they were sort of expired.
specific to.
In that next bullet, do you mean FY '24 or FY '25 for that 1.5 million in capital? Because we've already got,
We should probably amend that to 25, yes.
It's 24, just
Is it
because it's
24?
free cash, so it's actually
Oh.
appropriated in 24.
24.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's available right away.
Thank
I
you.
know it's confusing.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, the man with the answers.
Any other comments or questions on this? Yep, Chris?
Yeah, so the 1.5 for capital, that doesn't mean, that's just what we're gonna allocate from free cash. If you wanna put more towards capital, we can do so. We don't need to outline that here.
It does not need to be outlined here, but we would have to find it in other areas of the budget.
Well, I mean, this is what I've been talking about. I think we need to, as we're setting the budget going forward, especially doing this analysis, I think we need to build into that calculation a higher amount reserved for capital. Because I don't think we're drawing down the capital deficit with the current amount that we're setting aside on a yearly basis, at least for the last several years. So I personally would like to see that number increased and figure out how to budget around it.
Yeah, so it's a minimum, I guess,
Yeah.
is one point. The other, I think we need to look at that in the context of a whole lot of other pieces, given the general budget. Like, I wouldn't want to start piecemealing, we're gonna add more here, we're gonna add more here, we're gonna add more here, without looking at the whole. So I guess right now, I wouldn't be in favor of changing this number here. It is a minimum, so there's an opportunity to make it bigger, but just as a budgeting practice, I'd be concerned about saying, okay, let's make it 2 million, okay, but we're looking at we need to look at the thing holistically before we start.
Then why are we doing this now? Why don't we look at the whole thing holistically and then come back and set these?
Because we need this direction in order to form the budget. It's sort of this is one of the key guidelines that is used in actually developing what the budget is.
Well, isn't this the way we've always shown it?
Yes.
And then that the capital planning committee comes up with $30 million budget? Is that sure? I mean,
50.
they get very innovative, that group, and so I don't think we've ever come up with a bigger number to put out on this as a goal. I think the 1.5 was always a minimum.
Right, and we've put more in some years
yeah.
than
Oh, yeah.
1.5, I know that.
No, we absolutely do. That's not the point. We always do. The point is, though, that that's sort of the starting limit, right? I think the starting limit needs to be higher because
Okay.
we don't fund all the capital needs that we have on a yearly basis. Hence why we have a $30+ million backlog of projects. And that number is only going to increase. So how are we going to draw that down if we don't devote more money to capital?
So I think we have all the freedom to do that. I guess how do other people feel? I mean, that's a proposal.
I agree with you, Tom, at this point. I mean, it's a minimum, so if we can, we would increase it, but just looking at things holistically and where we are right now and what our budget is and all the issues that we have, I'm comfortable just leaving where it is now, hearing what you're saying, that we're never gonna meet all our capital needs and we keep falling further and further behind, but I'm not comfortable setting a minimum higher than this if we can't meet that minimum and then have to, make trade-offs that we don't even know about right now. So I'm with you to leave it right now.
That's where I think you need to set the next X number of years of budgets to accommodate a higher amount. If we don't set the higher amount now, we don't accommodate we don't make allowances for it in those budgets. So therefore, then we don't spend that. We don't have the ability to spend that money. That's the problem.
We'll have lots and lots of opportunities to weigh in on the fiscal 25 budget as we move through. So we're not, it's not a ceiling. We're not limiting ourselves in any way.
Just be clear, I'm not just talking about fiscal year 25. I'm looking longer than that. I'm looking 5-10 years in the future, right? So it's a strategic change in how we address capital spending. It's not just, year by year we're going to say this is how much I know that's going to fluctuate a little bit.
Yeah.
I hear it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, if the specific proposal on this bullet point is to change it, one argument is we should change it to raise the floor so that we're thinking bigger, and the other is this is such a budget, we're in such a budget wide open space right now in terms of needs. It's a minimum, we're not restricting ourselves, and so the argument for leaving it is that gives us more options as we try to wade through this problem that we're in.
Well, capital planning does look out 5 years, and we've had this kind of bow wave that we've been moving around, and part of that bow wave was the library, part of it was 51, and then those were part of the capital. And I don't know how these major projects, I think when we come up with some of the studies we have, we'll know more, and I think the capital planning is going to be looking at it in FY25. Let's take a look at what they come up with right now. What do they have on their plate? They have what the departments submit and what we submit, and then they deal with it. I don't know what number I'd put up here, and I think that 1.5 is just a good starting point. That's what I don't want to say that's what it's always been, but that's kind of what we've been doing.
So Chris,
But it hadn't kept us from doing $30 million budget.
So right now, this says allocate a minimum of 1.5 for capital expenses from free cash, right?
Yeah.
So are you looking to increase the amount from free cash, or are you looking to increase the amount from all budgetary
All budgetary,
areas?
not necessarily just free cash.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, but I'd leave that up to the experts on that. Yeah, I just think, so John, my experience in the last few years on capital has been, we get a list of projects, we have to, prioritize them, and we're supposed to do it in sort of a budget neutral way. So we just make the recommendation and the town manager tries to fit it into the budget. But in reality, it's really hard to do that because we're always looking at these numbers. There's a certain amount that Dan and Jody would come forward with and say, this is how much we have to put in. Now go back to your list and see what you're going to recommend now that we can't pay for all of it. And so every year we're always saying, you know, oh, we're not gonna get to do that, we're gonna defer this, we're not gonna do that, and we'll punt that to, you know, CPA for funding. And I just don't think that going forward, that's sustainable. I just think that we're not going to be doing justice to the number of projects that we need to do if we do
You got a point.
the capital budget that way. And maybe it's just having this conversation and you guys can figure it out in your budget and you can come to us and say, instead of it being a little bit over 2 million or whatever it averages out, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what our average, you know, amount is per the last 5 years, but I know it's not 1.5, but it's certainly not like 4 or 5 million. You know, maybe a little bit over 2 is typically where I think you guys come in at.
I'd say it's about right on average, yeah.
Yeah.
But give or take the starting free cash balance, that plays a major role in it, so.
Right. So I don't know. I just if the floor was a little higher, then my feeling is maybe that number would be a little bit higher, and we would have more money to play with at capital planning time, and we see more of these capital projects getting done. That's just where
I
I'm
understand your
coming
broader point of needing to get ahead of this and making more of a commitment to capital. So I read that point.
from. Okay.
In terms of this document, I think the consensus is on the side of leaving the 1.5 as it is. So.
Very good. I've made my point, so you know. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chris. Other points or questions on this document? We can either, if we feel like we're ready, we can approve it tonight. If we feel like there are some changes, we can recommend those
I think
changes.
it's okay.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Fantastic, okay. Accept and endorse.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good evening.
Next up, accept and endorse the deed from the appointed Commissioner of Partition by appointment of the Middlesex Probate and Family Court that the property will be managed and controlled by the Conservation Commission for open space, recreation, and conservation purposes under the provisions of General Law 48C, and said vote is contingent upon the Conservation Commission accepting said deed.
So I just think for the public's knowledge, people should know we're talking about.
What are we talking about?
What we're talking about here, because
This is
it's
House and Barn
it's the
Rocks.
house and barn property.
Tingsboro
Because
Road.
when I
Can you
read
show
the
us?
agenda, when it first came out, it was like,
What?
what?
The deed, yes, what
Here
is
it
the
is.
deed, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the house and barn property for anybody who's still watching us.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Any,
Up off of Tenny Road.
So the Conservation Commission negotiated a $12,000 purchase price for 4.8 acres of open space that is adjacent to several other parcels of town-owned open space. And we are now at the point of getting ready to be closing on the property. So we'd be asking for the select board to endorse the deed, and then the Conservation Commission plans to do the same tomorrow evening. And then the land would be officially Town of Westford land. My understanding is the Westford Land Trust would be managing the property. And Matt Salem is on the line if there's any questions associated with this.
Good.
any questions from Matt? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept and endorse.
So moved, contingent upon the Conservation Commission's doing the same tomorrow night.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, old new business. Consider a request from the Commission on Disability to appoint Wendy Gloyd as a full member for the term to expire June 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Consider a request from the Economic Development Committee to appoint Imran Nawaz as a resident at large for a term to expire June 30, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consider a request to appoint election officers listed in the meeting packet for a term to expire July 31st, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Board reports and updates. The Budget Task Force is meeting tomorrow, on track to have the document to you at least a week before the 18th. And tomorrow, Chris, we are going to bring up your capital, sort of discussing how the capital
Thank you.
dovetails into this process.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Minutes for approval for release regular session, August 15th, 2023, and August 31st, 2023.
Move to approve and release.
I just have a
Yep, go
little,
ahead,
I
John.
have a minor little typo in here on page 3.
Which date?
This is the, I think, the 15th? Yeah, the 15th. It's on the second, the third page. That first paragraph up there, get to the last sentence, and it says, select board members Perana complimented. And it should be select board member Perana Sweet complimented the task force.
You read it more closely than I did.
I never missed that. Andrea. Knighting your name for
So,
12
I
years.
mean, that was so important, I felt we should bring it.
I agree. Thank you, John, for,
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
can fix that.
as amended. We have a motion and a second, so,
I'm going to abstain on the 15th because I wasn't present on that.
okay, so why don't we do them separately? So first, the 15th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And on the 31st? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 8:55, town manager's report. Well, this is you.
Great,
You want
thank
to-
you. Yes, sure.
Take my glass off.
Take a rest. So I had just put this item on the agenda. I am planning to travel out of state for an ICMA conference this Saturday through Wednesday, but will be in full stead as town manager. Wanted to get the board's opinion on whether we should be appointing an acting town manager or not while I'm out of state. I will be unavailable for 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Wednesday on a flight, but other than that, plan to have my cell phone and laptop available in case there's any matter. So wanted to, again, just bring this before the board. I don't know what your general practice was in the past related to town manager out of state travel related to business versus travel related to holiday or vacation. So again, just wanted to get the purview of the board.
Your call, Kristen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, typically if I'm on a business trip, I wouldn't hand over the keys
Yep.
to somebody else. I mean, you're still working, so you're available.
Right. Yeah, I'm comfortable staying in the town manager position if the board is, so,
Definitely.
okay.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Okay,
So we'll
great.
skip that one then. The next one is to review the draft of the RFP related to 12 North Main Street, related to the brownfield cleanup. As we have been touting ourselves, we received $500,000 from the EPA to secure a qualified environmental professional. Eric Heidemann has prepared a request for proposal that's been reviewed by myself and the Director of Land Use. We feel that it's in good order to release, to get bids on that, but wanted to get the final approval from the Select Board before doing so.
Good.
Yeah, it's an exciting project, so thanks to everyone
Thank you,
involved.
thank you to
Thanks,
all
Eric.
who helped and did
Okay.
that.
So we will release that. Moving on to contracts, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the health insurance rates. We were able to negotiate a 0% change in dental insurance coverage, switching from Blue Cross Blue Shield to MetLife. The town used MetLife up until 2018 when we bundled with Blue Cross Blue Shield to see some savings. So we have reviewed this with the Insurance Advisory Committee and the Personnel Advisory Committee and would recommend to enter into this contract with MetLife for a period of November 1st, 2023 to October 31st, 2024, again for a 0% premium increase for our employees. The next contract is Worldwide Industries Corporation for construction services for the Francis Hill Storage Tank Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $789,440 as requested by the Water Department. And then Iron Shore for a 3-year contract to provide pollution insurance policy for the 12 North Main Street property in the amount of $39,152.88. We also were given a 5-year policy. We hope that we do not own the property for more than 3 years, so we wanted to just go with the 3-year policy coverage. And then for purchase orders, Northeast Traffic Technologies for rectangular rapid flashing beacons in the amount of $85,000 as requested by the Department of Public Works.
Any questions on contracts or purchase orders? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. Move waiving of reading of correspondence.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you, Westford.
Thank you, good night.
Thanks for sticking with us. Have a good